I did it right.
There you go.
I did it. So hello everyone. Welcome back to my series. I'll probably say this for every episode, but I don't know how this is going to release in what order. So I just want to say this is recorded in July. So if anything crazy happens or any breaking news or anything glaring happens that we don't talk about in this episode, it is because this was recorded in July. So just FYI. But I want to say hello to our next guest. So I'm going to be talking to Chris. Can I call you Chris? Or you go by Christopher.
Chris is totally fine. Christopher's just my resume name.
Perfect. And we're here to talk all things Steelers, all things him, all things about his content, what he's doing in the space, and just our shared passion for our team. You get the privilege of talking about them way more often than I ever could probably imagine. And so I'm glad to have you on just to share a little bit about yourself, and things like that. And then I also just want to mention that I found you because I consume your content. And that is what this is all about, is finding people and connecting to people that I actually feel like I interact with already, although I don't, but because I watch you, because I hear you, because of all the things, I feel like I know you, which is kind of creepy to say that out loud, but I feel like that's what happens when you're consuming content from somebody that's talking about things that you're passionate about. So if you don't mind just taking the time to introduce yourself and tell us a little about you, the work that you do and your platforms that you're on.
Sure thing. My name is Christopher Carter. I'm a writer for the Pittsburgh-Post Gazette. I cover Pitt football and Pitt basketball for them, as well as Steelers for them as well. But I'm also host the Locked On Steelers podcast, as well as the North Shore Drive podcast. That's also for the Pittsburgh-Post Gazette. But the Locked On Steelers podcast is part of the larger Locked On Podcast Network brand, which covers all teams in the NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB. Whatever you're into, they most likely got a show about it. And I just cover it from the Steelers angle there. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. I also work part-time here and there with WPXI, our Channel 11, our local NBC station here in Pittsburgh. I wear lots of hats, Tanisha. So, but bottom line, I cover a lot of things, Pittsburgh sports, but especially Pitt football, Pitt basketball, and the Steelers. Kind of keeps me busy all year round.
Yeah, I love that. Well, did you start with just one team, or did you start locally? How did you start? What was your first job that started you creating anything Pittsburgh?
So honestly, it was actually something I did when I was in law school. So I didn't take a traditional journalism route. I was at Pitt Law, and I was working an unpaid internship one of my summers. And I needed to make some extra money just for going out. I was just man, I can cover my bills, but that's about it. And then I saw $100 a month job just for blogging about the Steelers for BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. And I was like, I can blog about the Steelers. I can think about that because I've always been very much into football. I played it in high school. My dad coached it. And I've always just watched it from I understand this technique or that technique. I've listened to a lot of coaches talk about different plays and the importance of different plays. So I've always tried to mesh that into how I enjoyed football, and it's part of what I did. But then when I started doing that, I was like, I could incorporate that into writing. And at first it was just a fun project. It was just hey, once a week, I'm gonna write this. This is what I think. But then eventually it developed into writing more than once a week, and it developed into writing lots of analysis. And that led to one thing, led to another there. I got picked up by a group called DK Pittsburgh Sports here in Pittsburgh. I always was in Pittsburgh. I went away for 4 years to undergrad at Cheney University out near Philly, came right back for law school here. But I'm born and raised Pittsburgh. And then since then, I've been working in sports. For a while, I kept a foot in the legal world as well. But around 2020, that was a juggling. But around 2020 was when I got the offer to kind of make this full time. And between the place that I was writing at the time, the podcast that I was doing with Locked On and the Channel 11 stuff, I was like, this can be a full-time gig, and I can make more money than what I'm doing in my legal stuff. And that's exactly what I'm doing now. And I'm really happy at the places that I'm working for right now.
I love that. Pittsburgh's my favorite city. And every time I go, my favorite hotel there is the Renaissance, right across the river.
It's so nice.
Yeah. So that's my spot. I'm I'm going home. That's what I always say. And then I just it's perfect. Everything is there. So anyways, I'll get off myself, but I just feel anybody that lives in Pittsburgh, I'm secretly jealous. So being in Texas, it's not the same as Pittsburgh. So there's that.
Yeah.
It's different. So one of the questions I love to just ask people that create content, or really that are just like in a space where they're providing things to people.
Mhm.
What have you had like a favorite moment or two or something when you're like creating something for the Steelers where you thought, man, this is why I love this job. Like this is the moment. This is the thing that either stands out to you or just something that you remember as being a time where you were just like, I love that I get to do this.
Man, I feel like there's a lot of times like that. I feel like, to be honest, it's less of even about just the Steelers in general. I've had a lot of, it's more like personal moments when you cover a special moment and you get to convey that to an audience. That to me is the
Ah,
coolest
okay.
part of it, because like there's covering the amazing moments in games, and that's also awesome. And there's
Mhm.
talking about that. But like, for example, one of my favorite things I've ever done, period, and it wasn't even Locked On Steelers, it was with the Post Gazette. I got to write an amazing story about one of Pitt's assistant basketball coaches, Malone Brown, and he almost passed away about 2 years ago from right around this time of the year. And when he had a cardiac arrest, and it took miracle upon miracle that he passed out in the middle of the Peterson Event Center while he was on the phone with somebody, and a secretary who was late to a meeting saw him and was like,
Oh,
Milan, and
wow.
called for help. Immediately help came. They did CPR, but he wasn't making it. Someone went and grabbed one of the mobile defibrillators, shocked him back alive. Paramedics got there just in time. And because of that, not only did he survive that, but he got back to coaching in like 2 months. And so, I got to write that story that, talked about the importance of, one, knowing CPR,
Mhm.
knowing where AEDs are in every building that you are. And like that was just so cool. And like to this day, I have that connection to that coach, Malone Brown, who's a great person, by the way. And it's something that I can, like, whenever I see him, we're like, hey, and in fact, not to pat myself on the back, but I just won a national award for that story. And like, that's something that forever
No,
will,
pat yourself on the back. We need to do more of that as people. Like, we
thank you.
don't do a
I
good
agree.
job,
I agree.
like, yeah, because sometimes, like, for sake of transparency, like, I have a PhD, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, and then when I got a PhD, and then people are like, you have a PhD? I'm like, yeah, but it's, and people are like, no, like, stop. That's not,
Promote yourself.
celebrate. Yeah, like, that's
Yes.
amazing. But something that I hear you saying that and I feel this way, obviously, I'm started my channel, it's a newer channel.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've learned that I really love is the connection with people,
Yes.
and the things that you say. You don't know who you're going to impact, or who you're going to make laugh, or who you're just going to help on a drive home, or just like give them something that they didn't even know they needed. And so that
Mm-hmm.
connection piece has been something that's been interesting for me that I never thought of when I started doing this, that I love. Obviously, that's why I reached out to you, because I'm like, let's connect. Like, let's create
Absolutely.
this space where it's like, let's talk about our shared passion and things that we love to do, because people love to hear people talk about their passions. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a cool thing. So I appreciate that. What do you think your like superpower is? Like, is there something about you where you're like, I have this unique ability to blah blah blah, like as you're working through all these different spaces?
If I maybe not sleep, if that's a superpower, but if I was to say I had a quote unquote superpower, I think I have been blessed with maybe the luck or the overall ability to multitask and balance several different things. One thing I encourage everybody who wants to get into anything media, whether you want to be on TV, radio, podcast, just write a book, whatever you do, get good at everything.
Mm,
Feel comfortable on every form of media, and find a way to do that, because you never know which thing is going to be your in to making your career. Like for when I got started, when I really started to get noticed in the city of Pittsburgh for my writing, it was for film analysis. It was for X's and O's and breaking down technique. And, oh, you know what? Antonio Brown, you know why he made that amazing catch? Because he started the route this way and he did this and he did that. And like that made me notice. But I didn't I think my career really started to take off because of my podcasting content. And my podcasting content, I talk about that stuff, but I had to connect it with a whole different presentation for how to do my shows. And
yeah.
so that, Tanisha, has built up so much of my career so far, is that I'm able to, like I was telling you, before we got on, I do maybe during football season, I can do anywhere from 13 to 20 shows a week. And it's because I can multitask. And from the time when I was a kid, when I was in high school, I was a captain of the football team, but I was also the trumpet section leader of the marching band. And, there was one time where we finished a game and we had a band competition right after. I had to get a band parent to drive me to the band competition, learn the routine, perform it, and then do all that just after I had just been the starting right guard for the football team. So multitasking has always been a thing I've kind of had to do. Did the same thing in college with the marching band at an HBCU, as well as being student government president and having to balance things there. And so I've kind of carried that into my career where it is a challenge. There are some days that you just put your head down. You're like, oh, another news thing. I just finished. But at the same time, I've made myself indisposable. Pittsburgh-Post Gazette, they know that, hey, when a Pitt football news story breaks, Chris Carter probably has a source that's going to give him more insights on it. When Pitt basketball, something happens, he probably knows something, or he's writing something. Oh, but when the Steelers are also talking, guess what? He's also doing a show on that. And it's like, you make it so you're just so that people, if they care about what you care about and what you work in, they're going to run into you at some point. And that kind of stuff, that I feel like can be anyone's superpower. So it's less of a superpower and more of a developed talent that I think everyone can get into.
Well, and I think what I hear you saying is just putting yourself out there, just do it.
Yes.
Do it. And similar, I've been thinking about starting a YouTube channel for 4 or 5 years. And finally, one day I was like, screw it, just turn the camera on. I'm just going to start talking. That was actually my goal. And then once I started talking, I was like, okay, let me perfect this. Let me, elevate my voice differently. Right. And then let me see what's going on. And so I do agree with you. Sometimes you just have to do it, because doing it is the only way you're going to know if you can do it, is if you do it. So, well, that's cool. So I'm going to ask you this, and you kind of answered it, but what is something that what do you love most? Whenever I don't want to say when you lay your head down at night to go to sleep, so that's kind of weird, but what do you think about what drives you? What is the thing where you're I love this. I love, what is it? What keeps that motor going where you're it's okay, I don't have any sleep, because now I get to go talk to somebody new and somebody different and talk to my source again. Is it that connection still, or is there something else in you that's keeping you ready to go?
Part of it's the connection to the teams that I cover, but also the connection to my audience, because that's also just as important. If you can be the most sourced person in the world, but if no one wants to read your stuff, no one's going to care. I could have if I knew who the Steelers were picking in the draft next year, which this year I actually was the first person to report on 2 of those picks. And sometimes if you're not known, no one sees it. And so it's you're doing a great job, but have you built up your audience, and does that do anything? There are some great reporters that have been out there that kind of give up on it, because they're like, hey, I'm doing all this hard work, but no one's reading it. It's not making me any money. And so that's the bottom line, right? To me, so we're doing all this to make a living and to help with our finances. That's what we all get into more when we start to hunker down and get better at something. We're doing this to do that. And a huge part of that is developing an audience. And so one thing I guess that I love is that when something happens, I'm going to I love finding my honest reaction to this and then interweaving that into an overall presentation that people are going to be able to digest when they see it. And they're going to be like, I know what Chris is thinking. Even if I disagree with him, I was either entertained or informed or both by his show, his article, whatever he just did on that. And it means the world to me when people in public are like, hey, love your stuff, or hey, thank you for doing it. I'll tell you, one of the crazier things is I'll get the occasional YouTube comment that was hey man, I want you to know that I was in prison for a little bit and you were the only thing that was getting me through some days, because I'm a diehard Steelers fan.
I agree. Yes.
It's stuff like that, Tanisha. I'm just whoa, I never thought about that kind of helping someone.
I feel like I'm like that with my content too, because I always say I have a different opinion. And I'm just going to call it like I see it. You don't have to like it, but just hear me out. Just hear what I'm saying. And you might agree. Even if you don't like it, you might agree. And if it makes you feel a way, you're right where you're supposed to be. So, So let's talk about the Steelers a little bit. Let's talk about the best team in the NFL, the best organization.
They haven't been that for a little bit, Tanisha.
Yeah, I know. Listen, I have to believe it. Like at this point, I'm just going to hype it up until it becomes a thing. So what do you think success would look like for us this year? Like, how do you, like you said, we've been kind of on this, I feel like we've been middle of the road good, if that makes sense. Like we've been like, we're not the worst. We're still, people still want to play with us. People still want to watch us and all the things, but we're just not up there. We're just kind of the best of the mid, if I can say that. So what do you think success would look like for us this year?
I think success would be more than getting more than 10 wins, getting a decent playoff spot, and winning at least one playoff game. I think there's potential for that too. Like that's the other part of this is that and success also changes throughout the year. Like for example, going into Kenny Pickett's rookie season, they finished that year 9-8, and like when you can, if you had started the season, you'd have been like, I guess that's okay, but when you look at how they started that season and TJ Watt was out for half the year, it's like getting to 9-8 after their 2-6 start, super success. Like they absolutely did that thing. And then, and there's also like last year, a lot of people felt like last year wouldn't have been a success if they just won 10 games and they made the playoffs and then lost in the first round. But when you consider like half their defense got decimated, Kenny Pickett, ended up not having to start. They had to go to Mason Rudolph. I consider the way that they rebounded in, with some tough times, I consider that a success. Now, I don't consider that the ultimate success. Of course, then like the Steelers themselves will tell you the goal is to win the Super Bowl every single year. Like that doesn't change. But there's a reality that's like, look, like the Steelers are going through the transition period that every franchise goes through when they have to offload a bunch of talent, whether for age, injuries, salary cap, whatever reason. And I think like you see other organizations go through that and it hit them a lot harder. The Rams, after they had the greatest show on turf, right? You look at they had like a decade of just bad. Not 8-8, not 9-7.
That's what I said.
Bottom of the barrel. Exactly. And so like that's the thing. The Steelers, they haven't had a losing season since 2003. I was in the 8th grade. They haven't finished last in their division since I was born in 1989. Like that's how.
Now that's a stat.
Yes, that's literally a stat. It's a real one. And so like, and again, that's two different divisions because they are now in the AFC North. They were in what was called the AFC Central. So like,
where they played like the Jaguars and
the Oilers, which were the Titans.
What's actually interesting? It's interesting when you say that because people always tell me I'm a privileged sports fan because I have the Steelers and they've always been my pillar of consistency because they just are. Like that's what I know them to be. I never realized why though, until like hearing somebody else say those things back to me. You're right. Like that's what makes me feel so comfortable. And I'm like, they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out because I don't know any other way.
Right.
Okay. So is there anything within the Steel, like, is there anything that's not getting talked about? Like I said before, it's like big media talks about what they talk about, but is there anything in the trenches or with our linebacker core, is there anything you being in Pittsburgh, you covering the team, you seeing more than the average person, quite frankly, than me, because I'm a fan on the outside. Is there anything that you feel like we don't even talk about enough or we don't look at enough whenever we're looking at this team?
It's funny, as a person who has to make content on this stuff every day, sometimes twice a day, I don't feel like there's anything not talked about because I'm talking about everything. But as far as like you say, the outside perspective, I think people have not recognized the rebuilding project that has gone on with the Steelers in so many aspects. Like, again, like this was an organization that, people talk about the end of the Killer B era and how they didn't get to win a Super Bowl and there wasn't a lot of playoff success. But like, let's be real. There were 2 games in the stretch of what would have been from 2013 to 2017. So that was 5 seasons. There were 2 playoff games they got to play in those 5 seasons where they had Shazier, Bell, Brown, and Roethlisberger all healthy.
All in one game.
All in one game. There were 2 games, playoff games, and they won both of them, Tanisha.
Yeah, because Le'Veon didn't play that one time against the Patriots. I think he was out.
He didn't play against the Patriots because he got knocked out in like the first series. He didn't play against the Bengals or the Broncos in the game that they lost to Peyton Manning
went to okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
The Ravens in 2014 when they lost to them at home in that year, because that was their first year getting back to the playoffs after going 8-8 for 2 years.
Yeah,
that's what I always talk about, is that that team was so riddled with injuries, and then afterwards you see guys like David DeCastro have to retire early because of injuries. Stephon Tuitt, Marquise Pouncey, Bell left because Bell was made a bad decision. Antonio Brown went full Antonio Brown. Ben Roethlisberger just got old, and Ryan Shazier got paralyzed. You see all this talent that got shifted off of it. Most franchises, when that happened, you get the Rams, you bottom out. It takes you a decade to get back from that. The Steelers never bottomed out. They've sort of hit a lull where they can't get over the hump to be a better team, but they are right at 8, 9, 10 wins, for the past several years. And I think where Steelers fans should have confidence is that now they're starting to add talent. Like before, they were kind of just mitigating, figuring things out, buying time.
Piece. I always say it was like we were always trying to solve a puzzle and putting pieces together. Now I feel like we're just adding talent, and it's like it feels different. But again, I'm a fan, so sometimes you're like, does it really feel different? Okay. Is there any teams that? Obviously, we're in the AFC North, toughest division in football, all the things. We know the teams that are are there any games that just feel different as somebody that's reading the content, as somebody that's kind of in this space a little bit more? Are there any games this season that you're looking forward to?
Oh, this season. Okay.
Yeah. That you're just kind of usually when, we play so-and-so, it's because our schedule is tough. Everything is going to be, I feel harder this year than probably we've experienced. I say that, but you never know what's going to happen once we play teams and things like that. But is anybody this year that you're kind of thinking, I can't wait for that game? I can't wait to see what we look like.
I'm excited to see the Steelers and how they look against the Cowboys. I think that's all. Steelers-Cowboys is just a classic matchup because of just the storied franchises, the history they have of facing off against each other. It's a Sunday night football game in Pittsburgh. That'll be an all eyes on Pittsburgh moment. That'll be a lot of fun. I think the Eagles are always interesting because of the Pennsylvania history, but also the Steelers have never won in Philadelphia since 1967 or something like that.
Great.
Yeah. She's like, oh, that didn't help me feel at all. But to be fair, the Eagles also haven't beaten the Steelers since Heinz Field opened. So, in Pittsburgh, that is. So that there's that. So I'm interested about those. The Chiefs game, they haven't played Patrick Mahomes since that playoff game. And I think this would be the best suited that they've been defensively to take on that kind of an offense since that playoff game. So as long as they're healthy, I think they could be in a real good spot there. But I'm intrigued to see about a lot of these matchups in the division, how they continue to go. They've dominated the Ravens in the last 4 years. They're 7-1 in their last 8 games against Baltimore. And how, Harbaugh can't let that continue. This is supposed to be one of the most storied rivalries of the AFC North, and the Steelers have just dominated it. And it's so funny in an era where the Ravens have had a 2-time MVP quarterback, and the Steelers have just had Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, old man Ben Roethlisberger, Devlin Hodges, you name it. They found a way to survive with these guys, and it's just what they've been able to do. And I think that's what's interesting, is that this will be a very interesting year with Russell Wilson as the starting quarterback. And again, that's not to knock Justin Fields. It's just who they're probably going to start is Russell Wilson. But with him there, if Russell Wilson is the type of efficient quarterback he has been for most of his career, I think that is the best suited for what the Steelers want to be on both sides of the ball.
That's what I've been saying. His statistically, and me watching him, he was better than what we had last year. If he comes and he's that, we win. If he's even better, great. It's just okay. Well, it's nice to hear you say that. So can I just ask, I didn't say I was going to ask you this question, but I'm just curious to know what people are saying in the Pittsburgh area. How do people feel about Mike Tomlin? Obviously he's the guy. I'm all in. Is it like I see on Twitter? Is there a division of pro Tomlin, not pro Tom. Like, I feel like it depends on the game and depends on how the game goes. You get like these variations. Is that real, or is that just what I see because I see it on Twitter?
So, I mean, it's very much real. There is a very, very, very loud presence about not liking Mike Tomlin, blaming him for everything that he's done, everything that's happened that's been not good. But granted, none of the credit for anything that is good. So there is that, and it does exist, but I don't think it's as big as the people who want to make it loud seem, because and I'll give you an example, Tanisha, that you remember the Patriots game this past year and how depressing that game was for so many Steelers fans.
Yeah, it was terrible.
I'm sitting there in the press box, and earlier in the season when they chanted "Fire Canada," you could hear the entire stadium do that. I'm sitting in the press box, and you can kind of hear the crowd like that's closest to us. And there's one guy, and I mean one solitary voice that says, "Fire Tomlin." And he goes, clap, 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 clap. And he does it for like 3 minutes, but no one joined him. And it was just like, dude, what do you, and it was like, kind of like, it's not cool. No one's interested. No one's buying it. Wrap it up, buddy. And it was just kind of like, well, I guess. And then that made me realize, like, it's not as big as people make it seem.
Yeah, especially that game. Like, if you're going to chant it at any time, that was the game.
I mean, they had just lost to the 2-win Cardinals. They were losing to the 2-win Patriots. They were at a time where they were 8-4 at the time, 8-5, no 7-5. They were a game back of the Ravens.
Yeah, we needed to win. Yeah,
they win those 2 games. They're a 12-win team. They're either the top wild card or they're battling at the end of the season with the Ravens for the division. And it's just like that would have changed everything. But at the same time, it's like, I think there's enough Steelers fans that understand that, hey, Tomlin's not perfect. He comes with his flaws, but guess what? So does every other coach. And he's actually pretty good. And I think there's an acknowledgement that's like, hey, you know what? These past 4 years or so that have been just kind of middle of the road, they were supposed to be a lot worse than this, and they aren't. And I think that's the thing, is that, yes, there is that division where there is a group of people in Pittsburgh that don't like Mike Tomlin and have never liked Mike Tomlin and have blamed him for everything even before it actually happened. When he was winning a Super Bowl, they were complaining about, oh, he doesn't do this right, he doesn't do that right. They make up narratives. Like one guy, there used to be a narrative that he was terrible at challenges because there were like a 3-year stretch where he didn't win a single challenge, and then people still said that in like 2023, and I'm like, actually his record is pretty good on challenges right now. And they were like, well, it used to be bad. I'm like, actually it was bad for a stretch of 3 years when a certain person, Al Riveron, took over the officiating review side of things, and he just, for whatever reason, never ruled in the Steelers' favor. But if you look at Tomlin's record on challenges for his entire career, he's better than Bill Belichick, and in fact, he's better than several Super Bowl winning coaches during his era. So, like, is he really that bad at challenges, or are you just picking at something because you don't like him? And that's where I think that there is, I think there is an unfair side of coverage of Tom. And again, it's fair to criticize him. I've criticized him. I've said, like, hey,
we all have.
Right. And it's naturally part of the job. But I think anyone who's realistically looking at the situation, you can look at it and say, look, this dude has kept this organization afloat and found a way to keep them alive and keep them in conversation. And now they're getting out of the survival mode times. They're getting out of when they just had to scrape by to get everything. Like, you look back at most of their wins, Tanisha, since 2021, since the start of the 2021 seasons, it's required the defense to hold them to under 20 points. Like, that's the bottom line.
True. It's true, because we can't score more than that too.
Right. If a team scored more than 21, it was most likely a loss. But most of the games, like, I think if you went game by game, I'd say that 80% to 90% of the wins happened because the defense completely shut down the opponent. And that is ridiculous for how many games they have pulled out doing that. If this year they can just get to be averaging 22, 23 points per game, which would put them right in the middle of the NFL. It's not super special, it's average. If they do that, and that defense continues, I could see them winning 12, 13 games. And then all of a sudden we're talking about, well, Mike Tomlin, how did he do this?
How did he do this?
But again, they got to get there. They have to not get injured, because that's the other thing. They've been missing key player after key player in key moments. Even last year, they're going up against the Buffalo Bills, still outmatched, and then they lose the best defensive player in football in TJ Watt. that kind of stuff happens. And, as a coach, people say, well, you can coach around that. Well, okay, how many Super Bowls has Bill Belichick won without Tom Brady?
You can't coach around not having TJ Watt. I mean, come
exactly.
on.
Exactly. And it's the same thing for everybody. Like, Andy Reid wouldn't have no Super Bowls if Patrick Mahomes had to sit out.
Right.
The Super Bowl he lost was when he lost missed 2 linemen. So
look, Joe Burrow goes down and the whole Bengals organization. Like, come on, you can't. Yeah. I'm not going to lie here. There's a question I want to ask you, but I'm not going to ask you because I want to get to the motivation question. But it's about Cam Hayward. But I just want to see. I want to see where this goes. I have a lot of thoughts and opinions, but I don't want to open that can of worms right now because I'm not sure how I feel. So that's why I'm kind of like teetering on what I want to say. But I think what he does this season will be interesting because all of these, like, he wants an extension. There's so many things going on around him and he's almost like the last of the Mohican in a lot of regards. So it's just like an interesting dynamic. But so I decided to kind of end this on like a positive like thing about you. And you were sent the questions before this, so this isn't a trick question for anybody watching. He knows what I'm going to ask him. So what would you, now knowing what you know now, I'm going to couple these together. What would you say keeps you motivated? And what was something you would tell your younger self? Knowing all the things that you know, what is something that you would say to younger Chris?
Well, I'll say younger Chris. Develop a sleep regimen a lot sooner. That's my biggest thing is, man,
I need a good one being an adult. That's probably really good, actually.
It's pretty rough because there's some days where I'm just like, oh boy, I should have got more sleep. And I don't know how I'm getting through this. Like there's several shows where like, there's coffee in the cup that I keep sipping on that you guys see there. And that's just to get me through it because I am just, sometimes I don't treat that stuff well. But I think health wise, that would be a big thing.
Okay.
I think
that's actually a really good one.
Yeah. Cause take care of yourselves, people. That's a really big part of not just media, but life. Like you need to take care of yourself. And there's been times I haven't, and I've paid for it. And like, I feel like, whoa, this is different. I need to adjust to this part of my body. So there's that. I'd also say to keep walking with confidence, because I do think there's times in my life where I was raised to be humble in my household. Like my father, my mother, they instilled that into me, was to, be confident, but be humble. And I think that there was the part of me that embraced the humility part a lot stronger, because that just seemed like the more noble way to go about things. And also because like, you don't want to be the person who looked overconfident and then was the fool because they stepped too far out before they were ready.
Very true.
But there were times where I had opportunities to probably make something happen that I was reluctant on, because I was like, I don't think that this is that moment. I don't think that I can do that right now. And I look back and I'm like, yes, you can. Get out there and do it. And it's funny because I think back to, and there's times now where some of my biggest successes are because I asked the right question and I poked the right person, and I was like, hey, like, I reached out to the right person. They're like, oh yeah. And like that, sometimes you don't know who sees you and who respects you. And like, that's something that I really appreciate. Like, for example, I bumped into like Jeff Capel, Pitt's head basketball coach, there. And like, sometimes I'll run into him in public and like, I'll be like, hey, Jeff, like, I'll just be like, try not
to be annoying.
Right. Exactly. I'm a reporter. Your job is to make sure I don't know the bad things about your team. That's one of the parts of your job. So like, I don't want to come across nosy, but whenever I see Jeff, he is so open about it. He's so nice. We talked for a while. He knows my fiance. I know his wife. We've now conversed about 3 or 4 times in public, and it's really nice. And like those type of things, like, I think that I should, if I was you, and I tell my younger self, like, hey, be more confident. And I think that's where everyone can kind of do it. And again, be more confident with reason, like have some sense about yourself, because there's also times that radar or whatever goes off in my head has saved me from embarrassing moments where I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to do that. Like there was one time I saw Mike Tomlin talking to Jay Glazer at a bar, and there was the part of me that was like, you should go up and just say hi and just be like, hey. And there was the part of me that was like, no, stupid, they're having a private conversation. Leave them be, and their alcohol. And so like those types of things, like, just don't do that. And so like, I love that. But part of figuring that out, Tanisha, is learning from others, is to find mentors, find mentors who can teach you things, be around other people that challenge you, that you think that raise your own levels and challenge you to be better. And when you do that, you end up asking yourself a lot more questions. But I promise you, when you get the end of that, if you stick to it and you're diligent about learning from the lessons that you're getting, you'll be such a better reporter, writer, host, creator, whatever, or just person than you were before. And that is a huge part of what I think that I did embrace part of that, but I think that when I came in, I embraced the humility part a little bit bigger than I embraced the confidence part.
That's a good point. There is a balance. Like, not to turn this into something that it's not, but I hear you too from a woman's perspective, because I think I battle that a lot. Is like, I'm naturally a pretty confident woman. I just am. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to be too confident, like in this moment, like this isn't, and it's like, but that's not it. Like, that's not going to help me or anybody else, because somebody might be watching me shrinking myself. And so we're not helping anyone. But you're right. You're taught, like, don't do that. Don't be boastful. And really, it's not being boastful. It's about just being confident, like just being you, really. Which, really good point. I'm glad that you said that. So we're coming up on the end of this. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to say, comment about, before I tell you how much I appreciate you and all of those things.
I'd say this to you, and especially to women and women of color in the industry. Put yourself out there, do as much as you can, be seen, and do what I'm talking about, like how you're doing this here. Take on all that. If you want to make your way in media, take on all forms of media. Be confident. Work hard, be diligent, know your stuff, and know your stuff as good as anybody, as well as anybody else. Because if you don't do that, then people, as soon as you make a mistake, your mistake is like 10 other mistakes for the next guy. And that's something I say as a person who's close to multiple women who work in Pittsburgh media, and I see how when I'll leave their names out of it, when certain friends of mine, they might say the wrong word or they might use the wrong term, and it's just inflamed to the nth degree. And it's, wow, this person really doesn't know sports. And I'm like, wait a minute, but homie over there did it did it like 3 times last month, and y'all didn't get mad at him for it. Y'all just were just like, whatever, but it's that thing where, as Black people, we were taught you have to be twice as good to get half as much of what the other person got. That's something that I've really embraced and experienced, and as far as a Black man. But as far as Black women, it's double, because you're getting it from all the angles. And it's something that I recognize my privilege as being a male, even though Black males still have, we're still under our but there's still a prejudice. I'm still seen as a guy. Like, I'm part of the boys sometimes.
You're part of you'll get invited to the whatever before, usually before the woman will, just because it's like, what is she going to do here?
And sometimes it's that gives you the grace to let you make a couple more mistakes than a woman could. And I think that's the other thing is, I'd encourage men, if you're listening to this or watching this and you're in that opportunity, you're in a space where you can be an ally to women, be an ally, give them a heads up, that's what I try to be. I don't know. You'd have to ask, women colleagues in my market, how they actually feel about, working in the same, me as a colleague in the market, but I try to be an ally as much as I can. And I realize that, like, I can't change the world by myself, but if sometimes it can be that one person that helps you a little bit, that gets you on. And there's people that helped me. So I would say, if I was to give a message, one, to people like yourself, women of color who are fighting to create their own space, keep fighting, look to find help, because we all need it. Don't be afraid to take help or to get help. And people who are in the positions to help people, don't be afraid to look for those people to help in those spaces.
Yeah, I respect that. I'm ending on that. I appreciate you just reaching back out to me. Absolutely. And coming and talking to me and just interacting with me and just really just like taking me seriously. Like, that might sound like a basic thing to say, but I think so many times, well, the world is kind of crazy on some aspects, but sometimes people will reach out and you're like, I don't even know if this is a real person, but taking the time to actually see that I was a real person, things like that. So I appreciate you just for talking to me, and allowing me the chance to talk to you and getting to know more about you and your knowledge and your passion in the space that you're in.
Of course.
Because I didn't know how much stuff that you were involved in. I knew the things that I watched, but I didn't know how much you were involved in. So just thank you for being an ear and being an ally to me when I reached out and just said, hey, I have this thing. Like, what do you think? Would you be interested? So I appreciate you for that.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Cool.